We're delighted to be with you all again from wherever you're joining us on this webinar about remembering services. I'll say a prayer in a moment, but it does seem quite incongruous to me that we're talking about that season of remembering, which comes in early November, when we are sitting, for many of us certainly, on a rather glorious late summer day today, when the temperature's gone back up again, where it did feel a little more autumnal last week. But it's hard to imagine that soon we'll be in that very much that season with short days, darkened nights, and focusing on remembering. But that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we begin, let me say a prayer for us as we start this day together. Loving God, we give you thanks that you journey with us through every season of our lives, that you are present with us wherever we are this day. Help us to hear your Spirit speaking to us, to be comforted where we need comfort, to be renewed in our sense of hope in you, the one who has conquered death and brings us the hope of eternal life. In Jesus' name, amen. So, what are we going to think about this afternoon? I'm going to whip through a few different things in our webinar style. I'm going to think a bit about the cultural context that we're in at present, some background to a couple of different things that we could think about using this autumn season to help us be equipped to do remembering and talk about bereavement. Some of this I've talked about before, some of you may have attended before, some of you may have been new, but I'm going to talk about the frameworks we work in, a few themes and thoughts, mention some new resources. I'll be joined during the webinar by Katie Tutt, who is the project manager for a project she'll tell you more about called Loss and Hope, which actually covers the UK rather than just England and works across all denominations. She'll be telling us more about that. As always, we remember at the beginning of our times together, and it's always good to be reminded of this, that the work that we do with those who are bereaved, work about bereavement and remembering, it is deeply embedded for us as the Church of England. For many of us, it's our vocation, and it's really interesting at the moment, as perhaps we're being able to meet again with people face to face, to get back to doing some of those things that remind us all how much we love that interaction, that pastoral interaction with people. It's our vocation to be there for people at life's big moments, and it is the vocation too of the church to be there in communities, and we draw on many years of experience to do that. We draw on our training and that heritage that we have as the church, where we've walked with people through every season of their life. Many of you know I get quite exercised by the way in which some of our banks talk about what they do for people. And at the moment, I've been very taken by the advert for the Halifax Bank, which talks about being there for people through life's ups and downs. It's a people thing. That's our heritage, to be there for people through life's ups and downs. And of course, especially when we talk about remembering, we are deeply rooted in the good news of Jesus Christ found in our gospel. This, of all the seasons we minister to people in, is a season in which we speak of hope to people, the real hope and comfort that comes through the presence of God, who walks with us through the valley of the shadow of death. So, underpinning everything that we do, and many of you have seen me use this diagram before, is that sense that what we're doing, it is a people thing, it's a God thing, is making relationship. We're making relationship with people so that they might be aware of the relationship which God is making with them. Often we use this slide to talk about the fact that when people come to us, they have a particular fear and anxiety about meeting us. But as you will hear, at the moment, people have lots of different fears and anxieties going on about their lives, their personal lives, the culture we're in, the context we're living in, as well as that fear and anxiety they might have about encountering the church. We need to meet them at this time in a particular way so that they are reassured of God's presence with them, that they feel confident in the way the church will minister to them, that they can rediscover something of that sense of joy that even when we walk through sadness is present, because we discover that it is God who is with us, it's God who delights in us, and it's God who trusts us and in whom we trust as well. So we're really looking at that way in which we balance the warmth we have with people and the way in which we do things well. That's what this is about, that balance between those two things. So let's think about the context that we're in at the moment. What is the context for remembering at present in this country? As you know, I think some of you, we did a piece of research in January of this year looking at the impact of the pandemic in particular on bereavement and loss and grief. But it also allowed us to think about the impact more widely of bereavement. And we discovered an incredible national picture. We discovered that a huge number of people are impacted by bereavement and loss. In fact, over 90% of the population say that in some way or another they've encountered a loss in the last 5 years. And in the last 18 months in particular, we discovered that 1 in 7 people had experienced the death of someone where they would have gone to the funeral if they'd been able. So not necessarily in their closest circle of friends, but enough to feel that they were contacted, part of the community, and would have attended the funeral. But 1 in 4 people said they had lost someone close to them. So lots and lots of people, huge impact of bereavement. In fact, my statement, which I'll make probably more than once this afternoon, is that every context that we're in at the moment, every context we're in, whether it's the school gate, whether it's a church service on a Sunday, the backdrop to it should be there are people present who are bereaved at some point in the past year or beyond the past year. The really fascinating thing as well for us is the huge impact this has across generations. I don't know about you, but very often in some way, when we think of helping people to remember those they've lost, the sort of person we might think of as being the most impacted might be the older surviving life partner or the adult child of parents. And that, of course, is always going to be the most likely person we're going to meet, because in spite of tragedies, that is still the vast majority of deaths happen aged 80 and over. However, we discovered in our research that the people who've been most likely to have been impacted by grief and loss in the last 18 months are actually people under 35. And if we pause for a minute, we'll realise that makes sense, because, of course, if a person has one life partner, they might have 2 or 3 children, and those children might have 2 or 3 children themselves each. So, of course, the loss of a grandparent generation cascades down. And there are many people who are missing someone from an older generation at the moment. So the memory context is spreading across every sector of society, across every generation, all kinds of people. So there's a huge national impact of loss. But also there'll be particular stories in your local community, the way in which grief and loss is experienced. I hesitate to say it like this, but alongside the loss that's been experienced through the impact of COVID, there will have been those things that always happen in communities, those tragedies that happen from time to time, thankfully not too often, but they've continued to happen. Many of us will know of communities that have seen the death of someone who is way beyond the fullness of years, who is maybe only in their 20s or 30s, through a tragic accident, through disease, through illness. Those losses and pains are still happening. We may also know that locally in our community, we have a care home that's been deeply affected. So we will know what the local stories are for us and how grief and loss is affecting people. But I think particularly at this time, I wanted to flag up the way in which our local churches have been impacted by loss. For all sorts of reasons, not least because of our age profile, many of us are discovering that as we reconnect and draw people back, we look across our congregational lists, our electoral rolls, the contacts we had in care homes, and we realise there are many, many people who are missing. Maybe as much as 20%, 25% of our congregations may have been lost to us during this year. So our own local churches have been seriously impacted. And as well as the loss through an actual death of someone close to you, through not going to a funeral, people have also felt really impacted, particularly through illness, where COVID has had a significant impact on their family. I've listened to 2 or 3 stories recently of people's struggle and fears through the experience of a severe COVID episode. And that sense of isolation that people have felt in the last 18 months of being unable to draw upon the support they would normally draw upon. Alongside that big scope that we have, we're living in a season with a real sense of cultural dissonance. What I mean by that is there's lots of polarizations of feelings and thoughts around at the moment. Lots of people are feeling a real sense of anticipation at the moment, looking forward, getting over this season and wanting to move on. Others are extremely anxious about what's happening. Some people are feeling like they want to get back to fun. Others are feeling a real fear about the future. There is certainty that we're going to carry on as normal, and yet real uncertainty as well about whether anything will ever be the same again. There are those who will want to move straight towards celebration, let's get to Christmas, and those who are feeling deeply sad about everything that's happened. There are those who say, let's forget everything that's gone on in the last 18 months, others who really need to remember all that they've suffered. Do we want to stay with the past, or are we ready to move on to the future? I think it's timely to remind ourselves that immediately after the great period of loss that was World War I, it was followed by what we know as the Roaring Twenties. There is that sense that after a time of difficulty, people just initially have a drive to celebrate, to forget, to move on. And potentially the dissonance is that if you are the person who's feeling really sad, bereaved, lost, you are the one that feels even more out of step with the cultural drive. And that's where we may step in as the church, giving people permission to hold all those feelings. So how might we equip ourselves and use this season of remembering? Before we talk about the remembering services themselves, I just want to remind you about the importance of being part of the conversation, such as it is around death and around funerals and around grief. My sense is that during the pandemic, there was lots of public conversation about bereavement, but already it's falling off the radar as people want to move forward and stop talking about it. Yet we can still share our stories in the media, on our social media, conversations, in our sermons, making sure we're remembering that people are grieving, but also reminding people that they should themselves continually thinking about their own death and their own funeral. This could be a time once we can meet again freely to talk, to do something like launch Grave Talk, which allows people not to do bereavement support, but to think about death and to plan their own funeral. One of the things we discovered in our research was that sense in which people are not really thinking through what might happen at their funeral. And yet this last 18 months has brought that very much to their mind. What should happen? What might happen? What if no one knows what I want and it's not written down anywhere? So really think about using this season to bring that back into people's minds and get them ready for it. I'm going to hand over now to Katie, who's going to talk a little bit more for us about getting equipped about grief and how we walk with people through bereavement, and also some of the resources that have been developed recently around remembering. So Katie, over to you for this next bit.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Sandra, for inviting me to talk to you all today. My name is Katie Tutt, and I am Project Manager for Loss and Hope, which is a joint project of the Church of England Life Events Department, atalos.org, Care for the Family, and Hope Together. And the overarching aim of this multi-denominational project is to equip churches in bereavement support. Just a little bit of information about Atalos, one of the members of the Loss and Hope project. Atalos.org is a national signposting site which features over 1,000 services, searchable by local area and by type of bereavement. And there's also a live counsellor grief chat service. Those of you in the ITV London news area may have seen a report on the 6 o'clock news last night, in which 2 women whose mothers had died during recent months were talking about how hard they had found it to find support, that they didn't know where they could turn for help. And one said that she ended up searching online to find out what needed to be done when someone dies. And linking people up with Atalos via our church websites, our Facebook pages, or by putting up a poster on your notice board or some signposting cards at the back of church is a simple and inexpensive way to show people that there is a place to turn to where all the information that they might need is collected in one place. As Sandra explained, there's been so much loss in the past 18 months. People who have died from COVID, but also people who have died from other causes. Their friends and family members haven't been able to be with them, haven't been able to go to funerals, haven't been able to hold funerals in the way that people wanted. people who died before the pandemic and whose loved ones have had the lid taken off their grief by the constant coverage of the daily death toll. We know that not everyone is ready to return to our buildings yet, but there is a real need for us to reconnect, both with our congregations and our communities, and with the country as a whole, showing them that we as a church, we're here, we're ready, and that we can help to support them. I spoke to somebody recently who'd been running a really successful bereavement support activity. And when I asked them if they were considering running it again at a later date, they were really surprised, and they told me that they didn't think they would because nobody else in their congregation had died since then. Obviously, we need to reach out further than our congregations, and we need to be confident to tell people in our communities about what we're doing, to reach out, to invite them to come to our services, to visit our outside spaces, and to access our online resources. As the season of remembering approaches, from All Souls to Remembrance Sunday, we as churches are ideally placed to offer places for people to reflect and to remember those who have died. I do know and I understand that everyone is just exhausted by the stress and strain of the past 18 months. So to support you, Loss and Hope have prepared a special suite of resources which are on the Loss and Hope website, ready for you to download. You can edit them and adapt them to include details of what you're doing. There are special liturgies for your All Souls services, both traditional and alternative. As I said, we're a multi-denominational project. Posters and invitations which can be printed or sent by email. We have suggestions of prayer space activities which can be used inside or in your outside spaces for those who aren't yet comfortable coming back inside. We have invitations to services which you can print and email once you've added in your details, your church's logo if you want to, and liturgies as well. The prayer space activities are really excellent. They are often have been used in schools. In fact, this particular one is from the Prayer Spaces in Schools website, but there are plenty which we could use and adapt to be relevant to all age groups in our churches, and they're just so good to encourage reflection and to help people to focus their thoughts. I'm sure most of us have a chair in our church which we could place somewhere prominent with some pens and some luggage labels, just to encourage people to write down a memory about someone who has died, whether they be good memories or sad memories. It is really good to encourage a culture within our church of it's okay not to be okay. And sometimes people feel that it's quite difficult to come into church because they think everybody's happy there, whereas we know that can't always be the case. So it's great to let people know that actually church is a place where you can come and reflect and be sad. There are also ideas for Sunday school or toddler group activities, which admittedly are less likely to be a moment of calm for the child themselves. But something like this handprint flower painting can be a lovely activity and could offer the parent or the carer themselves an opportunity to reflect. And this could also be done with poppies for a remembrance activity, perhaps. As I mentioned earlier, we know that not everyone is ready to or can be in our churches just yet. And I'm sure you may all know about the Church of England Light a Candle website. And it's such a lovely way to create space to reflect and remember. It could be shared with a family whose members aren't all able to be at a funeral. And if it's possible to live stream the funeral, then everyone could light a candle at the same time, whether that be in the building or watching online. Many of us are still offering services on Zoom or live streams to YouTube or Facebook, and our services at this time are so important to make available online if at all possible. If you have some resources that you have used that you think others might find useful, do send them in and we'll have a look at them and consider them for inclusion on the website. And in recognition that grief is an ongoing process, we know that we don't stop being bereaved. Attalos have created these really lovely remembering someone badges. Many bereaved people have told us that they wish there was some way of telling people that they're grieving or feeling particularly fragile, like when people used to wear mourning clothes for a period of time, or even a black armband. And for those occasions such as anniversaries or birthdays, when others won't necessarily be aware that it's a difficult day for us. One of our previous webinar attendees thought that their church might like to buy some and bless them at their All Souls service and then offer them as a gift to those who were there, or perhaps to somebody their team was visiting, perhaps in that quieter time after a funeral. And another said that they would love to buy some and give them to the guests on their bereavement journey course. They're available from the Attalos website shop, and we can offer a discount if you did want to buy a number of them. And talking of the bereavement journey, it's a 6-session series of films and facilitated discussion groups to help people, bereaved people, process their loss in a safe space with other people who've been through the same thing and who understand how they're feeling. It's now being run by over 90 churches of all denominations across the country as a nationwide church response to the pandemic. And step-by-step resources and full training are available to enable you to run it easily, whether that be online or in person. When people have been bereaved, it's so common to find themselves asking those big questions of life. And the final optional faith question session gives people the opportunity to explore them. There's also a giveaway booklet on faith questions that accompanies the course that can be used generally. And if you decide to run the bereavement journey or any other regular bereavement support activity, you can add it to the Attalos website so that bereaved people in your local area can find it. A church near Birmingham recently ran the bereavement journey for the first time, and they reached 40 guests. 1/3 of them were people that they'd never had any contact with before, and they'd linked up with their GP surgery to let the staff there know that if they saw anyone who was looking for bereavement support, that this resource was available to them. And also with their local funeral directors, who also helped to spread the word. And we know there are many churches who plan to run the bereavement journey as a follow-on from their All Souls service, so that you can publicise it there and give those who are finding things tough the opportunity to process their thoughts and feelings. And don't forget your local press, local TV, online Facebook groups for your little communities or bigger communities. And also don't forget about your diocesan comms teams, who will be only too happy to help you spread the word about whatever you're doing. And a quick word about our bereavement friendly church webinars. These run regularly and invite church leaders and decision makers to review how accessible and welcoming your church might be to bereaved people, because we know that church can be one of the hardest places to be when we've been bereaved. And the webinar also contains lots of practical ideas in much more detail than I've been able to share today. And places can be booked via our website. So I've only been able to scratch the surface here today, but here are the website links if you'd like to stay in touch with us. So please do feel free to send me an email if you'd like more information, and have a look at our website and take a look at the resources available. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for that, for sharing all of that. We've been thinking about that was really about how we prepare as a church to walk with those who are grieving or just missing someone, because really importantly to think about here is that not everyone who is bereaved will think that they are able to attend something because they might not think it's their loved one who has died. We actually only use the language of loved one in a very specific way, often about a life partner. We may not even use loved one to describe our grandparents, for example. We might not talk about, oh, I've lost a loved one, when we talk about our best friend. We might say, well, my loved one died. So it's really important that we also have spaces for and use language that allows everyone to access it. And that's where remembering services often come in, but also making sure that when we're promoting anything we are doing for the bereaved, we use language that allows everyone to access it. Sometimes we end up simply saying completely, come here to think about anyone who has died, who mattered to you, who was part of your life. And of course, not everyone has had a loving relationship. And sometimes the most complex grieving is where you've had an ambivalent or difficult relationship with the person who has died. So remembering opportunities as they come up, give people a chance to do something, perhaps especially when they haven't been able to attend, but even if they have, to come back and do something again. They might want to come and give thanks for a person and celebrate their life, but they may also want to own their emotion, whatever that is, whether that's sadness, whether that's anger, whether that's happy memories, whatever it is. Remembering allows us to gather our thoughts, but also to gather people who may be people that we're with, who are part of the same grief journey that we're on, or just a community sense that we're all together in this. It gives us a chance to offer prayer for people and to bless them, to give people that sense of comfort as they go forward, and above all, hope for the journey that they're on. And remembering is something that takes place in different ways. We have experienced already earlier this year some sense to do with grief and loss, a national sense of remembering. Many of you took part in the National Day of Reflection, a day that was spearheaded by Marie Curie, but joined in by ourselves and many, many other organisations, until it really distilled down to a couple of 2-minute silence that took place on that day in March. And it's very likely, and the plans are in place for that to happen again in 2022. But other than that national sense for the pandemic, there isn't really another national day that will happen. But we do know, for us as a church, throughout the Church of England, church throughout the United Kingdom, indeed the World Church, the season beginning from the 1st of November is very much a season of remembering. And in our communities, there may well be important other anniversaries that we need to tap into as well as the one that we offer as a church. Increasingly, I'm aware that when we're talking about things like grief and bereavement, we have this amazing opportunity, not just to invite people to join what we do, but the fact is we're journeying with them in their life. So we're connecting with the journey that they're on of grief. And it may be that there's a special event or time in your community that will fit with that. And as I've just been saying, we need to make sure that the frameworks we offer are also personal and individual, and everyone who wants to remember someone feels included, whatever the nature of their particular connection to the person who's died has been. We've also said already that there's no time that people become unbereaved. So the time scale, it maybe as a church we focus it around the 1st and 2nd of November, but actually we may be thinking about other opportunities to remember. And remember that just because someone comes on the 1st of November to a special service doesn't mean they won't want to come over and over again, because individuals are remembered in multiple ways, multiple times, multiple occasions as well. So one of the things that's emerged from the work that we've done is some sense of the spaces and places where remembrance might happen, the dates and times when remembering might happen, and how we engage people by invitation and being interested in the story of their lives. So spaces and places have proved to be very interesting to us as we've done our research. And our research was very clear that both indoor and outdoor spaces matter, and that churches are places that people expect, and it's a difficult word to use, expect, because as soon as I use it, I think everybody listening feels pressured to think they've got to do something. But the word expect here doesn't mean we've got to do something, it just means also more of a sort of sense that this is what we do, that actually, yeah, church would be a place that you'd go to if you needed time and a space to reflect. Outdoor spaces are really important. So where we have got churchyards, graveyards, really important to people just to be in those spaces. But what we have learned as well is that people value spaces that are not prescribed, that are open-ended, So, for example, in your churchyard, a bit like Katie was saying about a chair, you might have a particular bench if you've got one, and you might put something on it that says, as you sit here, you might like to be reflecting about those people that you are missing in your life, about loss that you've experienced. So you're not telling them what they've got to do or how long they've got to be there, but you're just saying, here's a space, use this space as you wish. Naming people is really important. So opportunities that we provide for people to place names are very special. So whether that's through a tag on a tree or on a chair, a stone that people can place, anything like that is really important. And that's also true of symbolic actions. As we said, candles is the most obvious one in churches, but the prayer tree, the daffodil, wrong time of year, of course, for daffodils, but the symbol of placing something, of doing something that allows you to think, I've done this to remember this person. Stones dropped in water, whatever it might be that you feel able to do. People really need moments of silence and stillness, and this possibly becomes really important when we're putting together our services for remembering. We all know that we're fantastic in the church at putting together frameworks of liturgy that hold big thoughts and feelings. And many of our liturgies all the time have moments in it that says we'll pause and think about this. And all too often we, the leaders, move on really quickly. And we need to allow proper time for people to be still and quiet and remember. Some people value that, to have quiet instrumental music in the background of those moments of reflection. Others really need the silence. In the silence, we listen. We hear God. We hear God in the sounds of creation, in the murmurs of the building. We get a moment to look around. We realize the timelessness, the history of a place, and it can often bring that sense of hope and comfort. So don't be afraid to include that stillness and silence. Equally, what we know is that the traditions that we have are very important to people. We often worry hugely about whether we're using the right words, what sort of music we should use, is this right? And we spend ages agonizing over all that. In some ways, what speaks to people is our overall sense of welcome, our overall sense of warmth and care for them. And there's a flow for the whole event, and the deep sense that the place and space and words we use are hallowed by use, are traditional, is very important to people. It doesn't matter that they go away not being able to remember precisely the exact words that we use, but they will have a sense that we spoke of God, spoke of hope, and spoke of comfort. And that's really important. And actually, in our spaces and places, there's something about my story of my personal circumstances being held within that bigger timeless story, whether that's outside in a graveyard where we're surrounded by others who have died, whether we know them or don't know them, or inside our building that's been there for centuries. We get that sense that the story of God, the story of this place, is holding our story. And that also helps people find hope and perspective. When we start thinking about dates and times for remembering service, it's really interesting for us. Many of us will be thinking now about All Souls. I always put this in inverted commas because, of course, we call it All Souls. We have All Saints on the 1st of November, All Souls on the 2nd of November. Many people who are traditional churchgoers will recognise that as a phrase, but many others in your community will have no idea what you're talking about. If you put up on your Facebook page, on your notice board, please come to our All Souls service, won't mean much. Remembering is the important word. One of the challenges this year for the timing of this, and many of you will have thought of this already, is that Sunday the 31st of October, which is possibly some of us might thought, Sunday evening will be a good time to hold a service of remembering, is actually Halloween. And it may be that doesn't fit very well because lots of people in your community may be wanting to be out and about this year. Whatever we think of Halloween, we have to accept it as a cultural social reality that will happen. So you might have to think carefully about how you mark that event. It will also have been half term around that time as well. So you might want to think about how you engage with schools and younger parents, using some of those creative ideas for schools, for toddler groups, for other activities, where you remember that, you know, it isn't just older people who need to remember, it's a younger generation as well. And of course, that there's a bookending that will happen this year over a couple of weeks, in fact, beginning with the 1st of November and taking us through to Remembrance Sunday, which is actually going to be on the 14th of November. Armistice Day is on the 11th. So you've got a whole couple of weeks there to think about what's the dates, and maybe you'll need to do frequent events and have some other special moments during that season as well. And remembrance is when we do the war remembering, and I think that will have a special poignancy for people this year, not least because we bring our personal griefs to that national sense of remembrance through war, but also because of all that has happened in Afghanistan. I think there'll be a particular painful poignancy about Remembrance Sunday this year. You may have people who want individual services, and you may be thinking about how to put those kind of memorial services together now, or you may be talking to people about ashes. You may have done cremations in the past 18 months, were very small services, and now actively go back to people and say, can we help you now do a service that involves the burial of ashes, and expand that out so that it becomes a time of remembering. So make sure you communicate clearly what services and what the expectations are about what's going to happen at any kind of All Souls service you do. Think about being open during a period of time and advertising that, the traditions I've mentioned. Use the churchyard perhaps. Memorial, we've told the story before of churchyards where they have done things like inviting people to tie ribbons to railings if you've got railings, putting prayers into hedges, building cairns of memorial stones, all of those. Where you are able, and not all churches are in this place yet, but if you are able to offer hospitality of the cake and kindness sort, then think about how you show that at this season. Are you able, if not to invite people to stay and share hospitality, to take that to them in some way, to bless those who are grieving by taking something, sending something to them? Enable them to have prayer moments at home. We produced cards last year and they're still available this year so that people can pause at home and remember their loved one. And as Katie mentioned, think about if you are doing services, how other people access them on Zoom, or are you going to live stream them? Not going to spend too long on Remembrance Sunday because it's very formal, and most of us work with other local partners to create that service, but we'll be needing to keep our ear to the ground and think about what expectations there are about the kind of service we will do, especially as last year's service was so very, very limited. You might want to expand that out and think creatively about engaging others in your community and how people engage with it at home, which we again have resources to enable you to do that. But it is an important day, as I said, not just for the national grief about war loss, but also about our personal sense of loss, especially given the older generation, many of whom died during the pandemic. You know, we know when we talked about Captain Tom that part of his story was a remembrance story as well, because he was of a generation that knew about the Second World War. And we've still got a lot of that grandparent grief around, a lot of that generational grief around to think about on Remembrance Sunday. But clearly poppies mean remembrance, mean war remembering. So we use a different symbol to talk about that kind of personal remembering. We're not going to talk too much about it now, but I'll just flag up now the really important season that will come after we've done this remembering of Advent and Christmas, and reminding you to think about whether you need to include some kind of blue Christmas, time of sadness, time of reflection, prayer tree for that season as well. As I said, I think we might be entering a cultural expectation, depending how everything pans out, of whoopee, we're all celebrating Christmas, leaving people feeling a real disconnect with their grief and sadness. And church could be one of those really important places that names that. Which means you need to be proactive in telling people what you're doing. Invite people, give them clear information about what's going on, and suggest them that the relationship you made in the funeral is one that can continue. Clear communication that says what is going on, where it's happening and when it's happening is really, really important. All our research showed us that people are happy and comfortable that the church is a place they can go to, but increasingly people are not aware of what we do. So really think about how you communicate as well. Katie mentioned the resources that have been produced through Lost and Hope, which work across all denominations and could work in if you're in a local ecumenical partnership. But if you want to use some resources that have been produced for the Church of England, we also have posters and cards that are available. I was outside a church last night here in Gloucester that's still displaying the poster that says, if you'd like to pray for someone, a situation right now, look on this QR code. And I tested it out and it still works. And I thought, how marvellous is this, that there's this poster in the middle of the city, and I just hold my camera to it and it gave me a very poignant prayer to remember those who have died, and to pray for myself if I had been in that grieving situation, and for my family. So do have a look at those posters which have those QR code prayers on. There's still a huge place for that kind of publicity in our community. But also think about how we invite people to events and how we give them prayer cards as well. The sort of main designs that we have produced, same as last year, as what we call the Forget-Me-Not cards, which are about remembering. And we have this lovely prayer card. And this is a great moment to perhaps just contact people whose funerals you've taken in the last 18 months, drop them a card. You could use this for All Souls, but you could also send this card on their special day of remembering, you know, a first anniversary or a wedding anniversary that you know of. Loving God, be with me on this special day of remembering. Write their names in, or leave it for people to write their names in. A really useful resource that you can have overprinted with your contact details as well. And then we have one that's obviously much more specific for Remembrance or Armistice Day, for those who really would long to be standing there, but for whatever reason won't be able to do that. It just has the simple words that everyone knows from the act of remembrance. They're going down the sun, in the morning we will remember them, and one of the formal prayers on the back, and your contact details. Really helpful for those who want to be part of Remembrance Sunday or Armistice Day, but couldn't be there in person. So at the end of this time, we've got plenty of time for questions. Do put questions in now, because we do like answering them and discussing things with you. But we really, really want, above all else, to remind all of you present, whatever your particular role is in a church, that, you know, as a church, we've discovered through everything we've done in the last 18 months that we are valued. There is a real reassurance in that. Don't be ashamed. Have confidence in what we do. We are valued and we are valuable. All the ministry that you have exercised and continue to exercise is important. It's contributing to well-being, it's contributing to a sense of hope, it's bringing comfort, and above all, it is speaking of the good news of Jesus. And again, in our research, we discover that we as the church, you as individuals, are doing this well for people. Thank you for everything that you're doing in our communities to meet the needs of the bereaved. I recently heard the Bishop of Sheffield talking at a webinar I did in that diocese, and he was fantastic in affirming that the importance of this ministry to people. That, do you know, Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And as he said, if we're not there for people, how's that going to happen? This is what we do, and you're doing it, and thank you for that. Do what you can this year. Don't worry too much. We're saying the need is great, but small things will make a difference. Connect with the people you can connect with. And remember, all the time, you're becoming a memory maker for people. You're becoming part of their life story and their journey. It's not about them being disappointed about what you don't do, but about being delighted that you care enough to offer them something at this time. So you know where to get everything. I hope you do, from the Church Print Hub, which is a shop where you can buy those resources. Katie mentioned as well, they're also all on Loss and Hope if you forget Church Print Hub, and the Church Support Hub is there for you as well. Now, just a little rider at this point, we moved the Church Support Hub just this week on Monday, thanks to the fantastic work of Tom, Kathy, Ruth and the team. We have created a new location for it to sustain it long into the future. Inevitably, when you move websites, there's lots of challenges, lots of things that we didn't know would happen, and so do bear with us if there's anything you try to get at the moment on Church Support Hub and the link doesn't quite work. We are on it and things are being sorted, but there may be a couple of temporary glitches. If you find something and you want to email us, we're always glad to hear from you for any reason. So the Print Hub is where you buy things. You can also download a lot of those resources for free. We try and make things available for you to use for free. The printed resources obviously are on a card and have a different quality to them, but some of us like to print things at home, so that's all possible. Thank you, Katie, for your input, and as always to my lovely team of behind the scenes of Tom, Kathy and Ruth. Let me just pray for you all who've stayed with us till 3:10. And reminder again, we do really, really value hearing from you about what you're doing, what would encourage you. It encourages us as well to hear from you in this work, which is so important. Let's just pray. God of love, we give you thanks for everyone who has been part of our lives, but whom we see no longer. For everyone who's been part of our church community, but whom we see no longer. And for everyone who we've met, who this day is grieving someone who they see no longer. Stir up in us the gifts we need. Give us the insight, wisdom and creativity so that we can reach out and create those spaces where people can discover not just a space to reflect and remember, but discover that your love encompasses them around and about in every moment of their lives. Bless each person listening this day in whatever they're doing, wherever they are. May each of us know your presence with us as we journey on. In Jesus' name, amen.